Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 21st of January, comes to you from Sydney in Australia. And I'm still not able to go swimming because of the shark attack that happened just on the beach here a couple of days ago. And all the beaches in Sydney are still shut after multiple shark attacks. So I am spending more time at my desk, and I've been looking at lots of charts today. And let's just have a quick overview. So the dollar index fell yesterday. Turmoil on these sanction threats in the US is driving that lower. But having said that, the dollar has been in a long-term bear trend. Big fall last year, then sideways, and we're short-term, we're below the cloud. So that move there on the 60-minute chart is that move there on the daily chart. And if we look at the weekly, you see here, we're waiting for which way we're going to break. And the upside needed is a long way from the downside. We're wandering downside longer term on a new low. We've already got an activated downside target there, but a new low, we start to look very seriously at that target. So that's all eyes have been on that. And we've seen big falls in the NASDAQ overnight, and we will look at NASDAQ stocks today as a special section. But that upside target never got to activate the NASDAQ, and that's the key. We're failing to activate that, and we did see some pretty big falls from Nvidia down 4%, for example, and many will know that that's one of my big calls for the year in terms of where Nvidia goes. The other thing that's been really quite key has been what's happening in Asia, and Japanese bond yields has been a really big factor. And looking at the 10-year bond yield, all those targets, the upside being met, that's rising quite rapidly to not in terms of US and Europe, not a massive percentage, but we've come from nothing, remember, in Japan, and the long dated is looking very worrying when we look at the aspects there where we've got targets to 4 and 5%, and Japan is the most indebted country in the world with a debt to GDP ratio of 250%. And we look on Bloomberg, where I'd look at a lot of my bond yields and the targets, upside targets on the 10-year met. On the 40-year, on the daily chart, we've got 4.9, let's say 5%. So that's really going to stress Japan. And if we look at the weekly targets, the very long term, these targets generated over several years, we've got targets of 6.6 and even 7.8 on the weekly. Now, we've got to think about 5% before we get to that, but it just shows the trajectory of bond markets is really significant, and that's going to have very big global ramifications. So that's quite key. And not only do I look at Bloomberg, of course, I'm looking at TradingView. This is actually the Danish kroner, and looking at various other things here, like this is Salesforce making new lows, Bitcoin just really struggling and falling away there, waiting to see if we activate that downside target, and Apple even. Just a 60-minute chart with all the targets on TradingView. So you use the targets on TradingView, on Updater or Bloomberg. The choice is yours. And of course, on Updater, you can run on multiple data sources, over 30 different data sources available. So really quite key there. And I do post these on LinkedIn. So you can see here my posts of the charts. So follow me on LinkedIn and you'll see a lot of these charts, the gold chart, target met, etc. So keep up with me on LinkedIn as well, where I've got nearly 34,000 followers now. So looking back at the situation in Japan, that is what's spooking markets a little bit globally. And then if we come back to stocks, we can see this has just really spread through the indices. We are seeing the S&P future up 0.3% today, so it does suggest a little bit of a recovery, but there is a lot of turmoil all around in stocks, and so that's just sort of having a contagion effect where we're starting to see things coming through. So coming back to Bitcoin, It's up slightly this morning, but actually that fall away in Bitcoin, just really waiting for this to play out. We've got an upside target. Notice how the downside targets were met, given and met at much higher levels, 110,000 met. But if we make a new low below 84,000, that is really bad news. We go to 54,000 on that target. So we're still below the cloud. That is bearish. And if we go to the 60-minute chart, we can see those downside targets have all been kicking in. So that's bearish as well. So really quite key there. Below the cloud on the short term, below the cloud on the medium term. And if we go to the long term, just really finding support on the clouds, some very, very big upside targets. But we may have to fall before we rise. And so watching this weekly chart is going to be quite key, and a move below 80,000, and then we're into a long-term bearish territory as well. So that's the key. Remember, is to look at those multiple time frames. Now, I said we would look at the Nasdaq in particular, some really big falls. In fact, if we look at the Dow, there were some really big falls here as well. 3M were down 7%. IBM down nearly 5%, Nvidia down 4.4%, Apple down 3.4%. You saw that chart with the downside targets on Nvidia. A lot of the Mag 7 being hit. That's going in line with what we predicted. If you remember when we did the LSEG top 10 calls for the year, we said Mag 7 would underperform, and we felt that Nvidia had topped. If we look at Nvidia, the key thing here is that failing to make a new high is really starting to come in. We've got an activated downside target, an unactivated upside target. If we break below 169, 170, that will be the lower high, lower low scenario, new downtrend for Nvidia, and that's obviously not good news. And we did a session last week for LSEG on market breadth. If you go to the updated website, you can see those sessions for yourself and watch them there. So this is just really unfolding. Anyway, looking quickly at the Nasdaq, we just again go to the top performers, and in fact on that there's 18 stocks that are making new highs this month on the Nasdaq out of the 100, and 13 stocks that are making new 12-month lows. So that's really quite key. But stocks like Micron, that's looking very strong, upside target, making new highs. But you can see there's some very big names in there, like PayPal, for example, that are making 12-month lows. Adobe is another one. And quite often what you'll find is the worst performers keep performing worse on the day. So we are just seeing there, there's a 12-month low. We saw one for Salesforce. We just saw that when we were looking at the chart there in Nvidia, Autodesk. There's a lot of these stocks that are making 12-month lows, and a lot in between, and that's not quite a 12-month low there. Ferroval, that's one that was in the list that's making new highs. If you look at the list here, these are the stocks. So still stocks making new highs, but we are seeing a rotation, and it is away from the Mag 7. So that's really, really quite interesting indeed. And if we look at some of the other stocks here, we have Monster. They're one of the 18. They're making new highs. These top performers yesterday in a market that was falling. Look at that, really quite significant. So you want to be following the stocks that are doing the targets, and remember you can be doing that on your TradingView as well. So you can go to TradingView and you can just go to the index members, and you just literally click on. That's going to do the 60-minute charts, but if I go to the daily charts, it's going to literally just do the targets for each of these charts. So you can do it in TradingView. You're an updater. The choice is absolutely yours, but you do need to keep watching these targets. It's absolutely key. Starbucks, when I noticed this morning when I was looking, 2 upside targets. This is a recovery play. You would just do this on any stock you like, so it's really quite key. So have a go. Remember to share this Charts Today session with friends. The more people who watch it, the more I'll do it. So do share, do like, do send me feedback. I'm always happy to look at any stocks you like. And follow me on LinkedIn as well, where I sometimes post this too. And have a go at the targets. You can find them on the updated website. That's it for now. Until tomorrow, happy charting. Bye for now.